Before we begin the video, I got a confession to make. I'm old. Before the days of Nintendo Directs and digital showcases, there was only one time gaming companies would share news on their latest title and console updates. It happened every June and it was known as E3. Nowadays, companies stream presentations to showcase their upcoming projects or save some for the Game Awards or various gaming fests around the world like Summer Games Fest or Gamescom. But before all this, we had E3. E3 was unlike the rest of these though. There was something so unique to the formula, so special about gathering together either at the events held in Los Angeles or online watching around the globe that none of these, even as hard as they can try, can replicate. However, I know that there might be some people who might not be familiar with what E3 was and are curious about what happened to it. On the other side, you may also be older and remember the golden days of presentations and want to relive the past. So if you're either of these or maybe somewhere in between, I encourage you to join me here as we take a look down memory lane and discuss the history of E3 and what exactly went wrong. Now first we need to go back to where this all begins, and that's with no presentations at all. In the late 80s and especially the early 90s, gaming information was more difficult to obtain with the internet still being fresh. However, gaming was starting to boom again thanks to the NES and the various consoles that would begin to show. Game companies needed a place to announce their upcoming developments, be it with the public or at the very least investors and corporate executives. So that's where trade events come in. A trade event or a trade show is an event where companies of a specific market are able to highlight their newest products to the public, garner sales, scout competition, confront the press, and meet with other industry minds to network. People usually associate these type of events with technology, but it can be for pretty much anything industry related like agriculture, selling cows and shit. Anyways, these shows would be where gaming companies would gather to do these practices, with events such as the Consumer Electronics Show, or CES for short if you've heard of that name, and the European Computer Trade Show were among the popular options for these meetings. With this time period of the early 90s, gaming was booming in a way that caused these shows to become out of touch for the market. At that, they didn't quite respect gaming. Gaming wasn't as widely accepted as it is in modern day, and the executives definitely showed this. According to then Sega of America CEO Tom Kalinske, he said, "The CES organizers used to put the video game industry way in the back. In 1991, they put us in a tent, and you had to walk past all the porn vendors to find us." Now me personally, I would have made a few pit stops before heading to the gaming section, you know what I'm saying? Anyways, it was clear that the market and the figureheads in gaming could not hold these outdated trade shows, and a new group needed to be established. However, they had their boom to work with, and eventually the world had to cave in, and that was exactly what occurred in 1994, as the attention drawn from the United States government caused a new association branch to be established. This was in part due to the controversy of age ratings for video game products, with titles like Mortal Kombat and Night Trap being subject to plenty of hearings and debates on video game violence. Congress felt it was due time for a regulated association, and thus the Interactive Digital Software Association, now known as the Entertainment Software Association, was born. With this establishment, one of the subjects that was brought up was an establishment of the trade show firmly focused on video games. There were attempts to make video games a more important and respected platform at CES, but those talks fell through, and thus the ESA were back to making a video game focused showcase. This was when a guy by the name of Pat Farrell comes into the picture. He's known for being the creator of the GamePro magazine, but perhaps his most important contribution to the industry came in the form of E3. GamePro was owned by a company known as the International Data Group, who already had previous experience in doing forms of trade shows. Farrell contacted the ESA and presented a rough idea of what we know as E3, and they loved it and agreed to co-create the event known as the Electronic Entertainment Expo. The funny thing with all this is that CES did not put up a fight. They had offered gaming companies more space at the show, but a majority of the companies had sided with E3 given their past treatments, with Nintendo and Microsoft being the only exceptions, though not even because of bias towards CES, but because they were undecided on what show to attend. This pretty much caused CES to say fuck it, you win, and also made E3 the biggest show for gaming, all without doing a single show yet. Now with this, we can talk about the very first show, E3 1995, which was held on May 11th through the 13th at the Los Angeles Convention Center, which would become the primary home for E3 from here on out with a few exceptions. What the team behind E3 would come to find out is that the event would be massive. They were able to book a majority of the convention center with over 40,000 attendees that year. While attendance and stats are fun, nobody cares about that. What we want to know is the announcements. What were they like? So that's kind of the thing. With E3 being in its infant stages, the show didn't really have structure like they do nowadays. This also meant there weren't many announcements. This wasn't like a direct where they'd show a string of games with little to no developer commentary. This was for the business side of things. In the case of Nintendo, around this time was the release of the Virtual Boy, with the 64, then known as the Ultra 64, still being a bit away. Nintendo's show was mainly about piracy of all things, though they did sneak a few tidbits of games every once in a while. Now this show is well known for two things, the first of which being Sega's show, in which they formally revealed the Sega Saturn console, which was priced at $399 alongside some games. Now the other, and most iconic moment from the show came from Sony. This was Sony's official entry into the gaming market with the unveiling of the PlayStation and a pricing of $299. $100 cheaper than Sega's and a pretty good jab at them. But with E3 1995 coming to an end, the show proved to be a massive success. With over 40,000 attendees present, iconic introductions into gaming, and a set formula for future events, E3 was bound to grow into a massive event for gaming. Not yet. There was an E3 in 1996 that was held in Los Angeles, which also featured some major events. While footage is harder to come by, and it is generally for a majority of the earlier events, so excuse me for the lack of footage, Nintendo did have their presentation centered all around the Nintendo 64, and it showcased a variety of games. However, E3 wasn't just done with Los Angeles. They had wanted to expand E3 globally into a series of worldwide events, with the first event being in November of 1996, which was held in Tokyo, Japan. Things immediately went bad for this one, as one, their original sponsor Sony had backed out in favor of hosting their own PlayStation Expo that year, while Sega had waited until the last minute to bail out, leaving only Nintendo as the major company to appear that year. As a result of this and a mix of poor marketing and company manufacturers present, E3 1996 led to a pretty poor turnout to Japan's side and canned any future idea of them going global, with events in Canada and Singapore being out of the picture as well. E3 1997 and 98 were both held in Atlanta, Georgia due to a failed negotiation with the Los Angeles Convention Center, though outside of one more E3 this will never happen again. Turnout for these two shows were also in a bit of a slump due to the majority of companies being West Coast based, at that not many developers to begin with. So after this, E3 would return to LA and continue to grow in popularity from there. Moments were plentiful at E3. I won't go into every single year, just the ones that are worth talking about for the video, but I did want to share some moments that happened from 1997 to 2006. In 1997, we saw the reveals of GoldenEye 007, Half-Life, Fallout, and Metal Gear Solid, while 1998 saw the announcement of the Sega Dreamcast. Heading into the millennium saw the focus be laid on Sony's PS2, which I'm sure by now we all know became one of the most successful consoles of all time. The console retailed on October 26 for $299, with the additional stimulus by Konami with Metal Gear Solid 2 supposedly inbound in the same year. 2001 though might be the biggest hitter of this decade from all companies. Nintendo had revealed the GameCube, then going by Project Dolphin back during the initial announcement at a previous E3. As you can imagine, this also came with the iconic reveal of Super Smash Bros. Melee, though featured other things such as Zelda before it ended up being Wind Waker, Mario Kart, Luigi's Mansion, and of course Pikmin. As for the other competitors, Sega's Dreamcast was dying and they needed one final push that year. They didn't get it. Sega gave up quickly in January of 2001, opting to go third party instead. Nintendo got Sonic, kinda, Sony grabbed Virtua Fighter, and they made a rough prediction that they could overtake EA as the biggest third party developer, and I think that prediction aged pretty well nowadays. On Sony's side, they had a big focus on software, showing new franchises Devil May Cry and Jak and Daxter, while giving sequels to Klonoa and Silent Hill 2. Wait, that doesn't make any fucking sense. They gave a sequel to a sequel? Okay. However, the most unique addition, and the one that would shape E3 for the rest of the event's life, was Microsoft. At E3 2001, Microsoft officially joined the video game console war with the unveiling of the Xbox. While outside of Halo they didn't show too much of note, it was still a massive moment in gaming history, and as stated earlier would become the core trio heading into the remaining E3s. The three final years of the section, being E3 2004, 2005, and 2006, are three heavy hitters to go out on, with 2006 in specific being the biggest hitter. Would you believe it? I fucking lied again, it was not 2001, sorry. Anyways, in 2004 we saw the handheld war of the DS and the PlayStation Portable kick off, except for it was already burned from the start for Sony, as they weren't ready to show it off quite yet to the public beyond the physical handheld itself. No game, no UI, just kind of a demo of the hardware itself. Nintendo capitalized on this by going full arms with the DS, packed with its dual screens, stylus, and Wi-Fi potential. Also came out the games. Backed by the new president of Nintendo America, Reggie Fils-Aimé, titles like Mario 64 DS, Minish Cap, and Metroid Prime Hunters were shown off, in addition to the actual reveal of the realistic Zelda title from E3 2001, which we'd later known as Twilight Princess. Then moving on to 2005, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony all came blazing with their new hardware. On Nintendo's side, they would give detail of the Revolution, which would become the Wii. Included in these details were confirmation of Twilight Princess, a Mario Bros title, and Smash Bros Brawl were all heading to the Revolution, with Brawl being a launch title. Though details on the Wii would be expanded on further in 2006, it was still nice to know they were coming. Sony revealed the PS3, though this presentation is nothing compared to the infamy of the 2006 show and the pricing fiasco. As for Microsoft, they showed off the next console in the Xbox lineage, titled the Xbox 360. Focused in on connectivity, you could message friends, play online games, download games digitally. It was a true revolution for its time. But now getting on to 2006, the final of our 3 crazy years, this would essentially be everyone's actual reveal of their consoles. In 2005, it was mainly just details about what they'd offer, but in 2006, we'd actually see the real things. The Wii had a ton of promise, and as we'd later find out, would prove to be worthy of said promise. Motion controls, Super Mario Galaxy, Wii Sports, Smash Brawl with the confirmation of Snake from Metal Gear Solid joining in, capped off an incredible show for Nintendo. Sony, however, could not say the same. While the games they showed weren't an issue, the pricing was a major focal point of this. Retailing for an insane $599 60GB version, it did not set them well for the start of the generation. Microsoft knew how to capitalize on it. With them revealing the Xbox 360, they had everything in motion. Better price and features gave them a great lead early on and capped off a phenomenal 3-year stretch. In 2007, something would happen to E3 that would cause the first major low point in the event's history. The ESA had learned of the exhibitors' worthy of costs, spending anywhere from $5 to $10 million on their booths. In addition to the displeasure of bloggers and false industry people getting access to their booths in closed-door events instead of journalists and industry representatives, this caused for multiple companies to threaten E3 with walking out on the event. To combat this, E3 and the ESA had announced that E3 from now on would be a more closed-off event, capping at the maximum 10,000 attendees for 2007 and 5,000 for 2008. This immediately caused a ton of backlash, citing lack of media coverage and general interest due to the public not being allowed into these showcases. The damage to E3 was far too great to continue practicing like this, so they made a compromise. Starting in 2009, the event would generally be back open to the public, in quotation marks, though capped at 45,000 for that year to strike a balance with developers so they weren't too overwhelmed. This proved to be a massive success. Along with the permanent residency at the Los Angeles Convention Center, E3 was back on the upward trend once more. Announcements for E3s for the 2010s were plentiful as well. Some highlights throughout the years included Microsoft's Kinect reveal and Nintendo Skyward Sword trailer in 2010, the Wii U and PlayStation Vita debuts in 2011, Xbox's disastrous Xbox One reveal and Sony's incredible PS4 reveals in 2013, Final Fantasy VII Remake being officially announced in 2015, as well as 15's announcement at E3 2013. There were lots of great memories here as well, though 2 things would happen that would be a clear beginning of the end of E3. In 2013, a shift would begin to happen at E3. Prior to this, press conferences were always in person. They'd be standing on stages with presenters from company talking about the new games and consoles, but this was also now the early to mid 2010s. The internet was more accessible than ever before, and word-of-mouth marketing via social media and websites began to become the new norm over general press conferences. The first 2 companies to realize this were Nintendo and EA, both pulling in-person press conferences in 2013. While Nintendo would still have booths present at the event and use E3 marketing till the event's cancellation, they opted to use their new digital news showcase, Nintendo Direct, for all future announcements. The first of which would be here at E3 2013. While it would take time, other companies would follow suit. Sony would opt out of E3 beginning in 2018 in favor of hosting their own take on the digital presentation format, dubbed State of Play. Microsoft, on the other hand, would be the last of the big 3 to do in-person press conferences, though they ultimately moved to the digital showcase as well. However, with this we saw one final push from E3, beginning technically in 2016 but more so in 2017. E3 would officially be open to the public. For viewers like me and you, we could attend E3 now, participating in the booths, press conferences, etc. As great as this was for the consumer, it did not help the companies at all. Increasing pricing for booths and the return of being overwhelmed, companies began to see that doing a digital showcase was far more effective budget and advertising-wise. Alongside controversies surrounding ESA president Mark Gallagher, companies had advocated for E3 to be split into a separate company, citing that the ESA cannot act as an owner of the E3 event while acting as a legislative group at the same time. This had caused for E3 to lose a third of its vendors by 2019, and with COVID taking the world by storm in 2020, the first cancellation of E3 would happen on March 11th, 2020. My fucking birthday, actually. I remember this day very well. My school got switched to remote, NBA season went to the bubble, and E3 got canceled as well. It was probably the worst birthday I've ever had. After this, there would only be one final E3 event, being E3 2021. However, this would be the first and only event to be entirely online, as effects from the pandemic were still too strong to hold a mass person event. To add insult to injury, heading back to 2019, there was a massive data breach leak with E3 where over 2,000 attendees, being mostly press, were leaked online, followed by another 6,000 of previous year's attendees, so the writing was pretty much on the wall for E3, and it would sunset in December 23, following 2 years of attempts to resume events. However, I mentioned that there were 2 reasons as to why this happened. Digital events played a big role in addition to the pandemic in consumer and company trust breaking, but there's one more reason that, while it may not be indirectly responsible, almost in a way feels like it's intentionally responsible. If you know where I'm heading with this, but if you don't, allow me to tell you. This reason is a person, one guy in specific, Jeff Keighley. Now, I'm absolutely not saying he's directly responsible for this. He didn't just walk into the E3 executive rooms and said that he was on a quest to vanquish E3. Okay, so first some background on Jeff Keighley. Keighley had long been a part of the gaming media side of things, having been a previous presenter of things like Spike TV Awards and, in our case, the E3 Coliseum. This was an event during E3 where he'd invite various developers for interviews and further looks at revealed titles, though he would leave E3 in 2020 citing a disapproval of the direction they were heading in, and as much as I shit on Keighley, he was completely justified here. But going a little back in time to his departure from Spike TV Awards, he began developing a new show hosted and operated by him, dubbed the Game Awards. The show is essentially exactly what it sounds like, a yearly award show giving out honors to the best games released of that year. This wasn't much of a threat to E3 as the show was held in December as opposed to E3's June slot. However, the Game Awards rose in popularity. Each year would garner more and more acclaim and eyes on it, making Jeff a prominent figurehead in gaming media. Also in these shows would be reveals of some games, most important to me being Bayonetta 3's teaser, but I mean that's just me. However, in 2020, following the cancellation of E3 for that year and Jeff's leave from the E3 team, he announced a new show during the summer, dubbed the Summer Games Fest. This is what I meant by saying he was kinda responsible. Anyways, this event would pretty much be like E3 though. In its final years, it was an all-summer... Let's just redo that damn thing, sorry. Anyways, this event would pretty much be like E3 though. In its first year, it was an all summer long event before structuring it down to a month and a week period in following years. But as with the Game Awards before, Summer Games Fest would receive game announcements from major publishers. Crash Bandicoot 4, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Metaphor, among many others proved that he could get major titles on his shows, even if sometimes he kinda set expectations too high. But overall, I'd say his rise in gaming was more so a nail in the coffin rather than a definitive blow to E3. To close this out, I wanted to give some final thoughts of E3. Everything I mentioned up to this point went over E3's history and why it inevitably failed, but I wanted to speak on what E3 was like for me. Not everything was perfect as we learned throughout today's video, but E3 was still special to me and a lot of others around the world. Everyone has showcases nowadays and they're all great fun, no doubt about that. I'd say we got the best possible solution to E3 with these digital presentations, but they all lack the experience of E3. Nothing beats that live press conference time. Sure, there were cringe moments, but that's what made E3 so fun was its quirkiness. The crowd reactions, the presenters, the moments and games it brought, that's just what made E3 special. And with the forced nature of Games Fest and the advertisements, it just won't light a candle to the magic of E3. Today we learned that E3 ended due to a lack of interest from both consumer and company. The rise of digital media consumption caused for companies to care less about the in-person experience in favor of a budget-friendly digital presentation. And when it comes to competition, in the case of Jeff Keighley, sometimes people just know when to strike and change up the game. To wrap it up, I wanted to hear your guys' memories of E3 down below if you have any. For me, my favorite has to be from 2017 to 2019's for Nintendo. The nostalgia I have for all those days as a whole, watching the presentation in the morning, then going to an amusement park following 2019's show and refreshing my timeline during the wait in line for a ride is among my favorite memories during E3. But anyways, that was all from me. Let me know what you guys thought down below as well as any memories you have. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.